Yes, this is really important. Asian Americans were redlined from opening businesses in white neighborhoods because white people didn't want Asian Americans operating in their neighborhoods and didn't want Asian Americans profiting off of white people. But because the positionality of Asian Americans is weaponized to oppress Black people, Asian Americans were being given loans to open businesses in Black communities, even though Black people were not able to receive loans to open businesses in their own communities. Obviously, the issue of Asian American-owned businesses operating in Black communities is a huge source of tension because it is part of the daily violence faced by Black people in their own communities when they are disrespected as customers, to the literal physical violence, as was the case of the salon in Brooklyn, where a Black woman was locked into the salon by workers while they beat her with broomsticks, to the damage done to the psyches of particularly Black children when they are accused of shoplifting. And this isn't a topic that I'm going to be able to cover in one video, but it is a conversation that I do want to start.
I think there is something that I've been thinking about for quite some time, and it is that I think there is a bad blood between the Asian American people and the Black American people. Have you ever wondered why every time since time immemorial, by the way, whenever Black people set up strong communities, maybe social amenities and businesses, people destroy them? Have you ever asked yourself why? Well, in this video, a bold Asian woman, I think she's Chinese. Her handle on TikTok is Amichen. You can check out her videos there. Breaks down everything on how the US government has systemically used Asian immigrants to set up business in Black neighborhoods to siphon away Black wealth. So Asian people have been used to block Black success in the United States. They have been weaponized. So let us watch this video. Credits to the creator Amichen. You can check out her videos on TikTok, and I'll be back after this. Thank you.
I find that a good way to help people who have a different lived experience than you exercise empathy for the struggles that you face that they may not be familiar with is to help them understand. And I was hoping that you could help me understand what anti-white racism looks like. Can you tell me about how you don't know where your ancestors came from because they were kidnapped and enslaved? Or how you don't know what languages they spoke, what spiritual practices they had, or what traditional knowledge that should have been your birthright was lost? Not because they were allowed to and wanted to assimilate, but because their enslavers or residential schools forced them to assimilate. Can you tell me about how your ancestors had explosives tied to them while they were building the United States railroads? And then as a show of appreciation, they were excluded from society for nearly 60 years? And could you tell me about the hundreds of towns that were destroyed, like the Black towns and Chinatowns and Japan towns, all destroyed by the same demographic? Can you tell me about the children who were unalived because they whistled at a woman or because they floated in a lake a little too far past the segregation line? And can you tell me how it was for your parents and your grandparents to be United States citizens who were put in internment camps on United States soil? Can you tell me how it was for your family to live in the back of their store because people who look like you were not allowed to purchase or rent homes? And could you tell me how it was for your parents and for you to shed blood, to be treated as human, as equal, and to be allowed to simply share the same space as other people? Can you tell me about the conversations that you have to have with your children about police interactions? And could you tell me about how your mother and your sisters and your daughters are concerned about having children because of lack of equitable access to healthcare, because doctors were told that people who look like you can't feel pain? Can you tell me how it feels to know that your ancestors lived here for thousands of years, but when you try to come here, you and your children are put in cages? And can you tell me how it felt when a few years ago, the president entertained having people who look like you expelled from the country again? Can you tell me what anti-white racism looks like beyond having your feelings hurt, feeling uncomfortable, and having your sense of superiority challenged? And when you're done telling me what anti-white racism feels like for you, could you please tell me why you're not fighting to end racism for everybody? Yes, this is really important. Asian Americans were redlined from opening businesses in white neighborhoods because white people didn't want Asian Americans operating in their neighborhoods and didn't want Asian Americans profiting off of white people. But because the positionality of Asian Americans is weaponized to oppress black people, Asian Americans were being given loans to open businesses in black communities, even though black people were not able to receive loans to open businesses in their own communities. Obviously, the issue of Asian American-owned businesses operating in black communities is a huge source of tension because it is part of the daily violence faced by black people in their own communities when they are disrespected as customers, to the literal physical violence, as was the case of the salon in Brooklyn, where a black woman was locked into the salon by workers while they beat her with broomsticks, to the damage done to the psyches of particularly black children when they are accused of shoplifting. And this isn't a topic that I'm going to be able to cover in one video, but it is a conversation that I do want to start. I think that if you ask some people what was the source of the tension, they'll say the LA riots and what happened in Koreatown, but you cannot mention the LA riots without recognizing the unaliving of Latasha Harlins the year before. A 15-year-old girl who was unalived by an Asian shop owner who thought that she was shoplifting orange juice, but the money to pay for the orange juice was in her hand when she was unalived. To overlook that is to value profit and property over black bodies, which is at the root of the United States systemically racist system and capitalism. But I think that we have to go all the way back to the Civil Rights Amendment of 1964 and then the opening of Asian immigration in 1965. So in 1964, white power structure almost faced accountability to black people. Black people should have started to be able to receive loans to open businesses in their own communities. But instead, in 1965, the United States opened the door to Asian immigration, and redlining meant that Asian Americans were receiving business loans, but only to open businesses in black communities, and black people were still not receiving loans to open businesses in their own communities. So where you have this weaponized positionality of Asian Americans being put in black people's way, of course you are going to have resentment not only over the supplanted opportunity to open businesses in their communities, but also over the fact that the black dollar is now being paid out twice. Once when the customer pays for the goods or services, and then again when the Asian business owner removes that wealth from the black community. And I frequently heard the tension being framed as mutual misunderstanding, where these Asian shop owners didn't know about the civil rights struggles of black people, and black people were not familiar with the culture of Asian business owners. But I don't think that it can be framed as mutual misunderstanding where there is an uneven power dynamic. You have one demographic that is the business owners, and you have the other demographic that is having to pay. So where there is uneven power, I don't think that it's accurate to frame it as mutual misunderstanding. So my ancestors were asked by white men to come to this country, which they had stolen and forced black people to build, because they were hoping that my ancestors would be the new cheap and disposable labor to undercut the recently freed black people that lazy white men didn't want to pay. And when my ancestors wouldn't do that, they were and massacred, their towns were destroyed, they were blown up while building the railroads, and ultimately they were excluded from society in the country for nearly 60 years. Then when the United States asked us to come back in the 1960s because they wanted to put us in the way of black people again, and the United States needed to rehabilitate its reputation with Asian countries that were gaining in economic and political power, we had civil rights because of black people. You're obviously not aware of this, but blessed is not a word that the global majority thinks of in association with Europeans. Words like plague and colonizer, maybe, but not blessed. And the cell phone in my hand came from China. So I don't know if you're referencing Steve Jobs or Martin Cooper or the Finnish inventor who created the first pocket-sized telecommunication device in 1917, and you probably don't know either because your education system has left you terribly ignorant and without the critical thinking skills necessary to effectively gather information. Because you believe that most great inventions can be attributed to one white person, as opposed to recognizing that the patent system is how white people colonize intellectual property. We would not have cell phones if it wasn't for the creation of the gamma electrical cell by black inventor Henry T. Sampson. And most of our cell phones would not have microphones in them if it wasn't for the particular microphone that was created by Black inventor James Edward West. The creation of the first digital network, 1G, was launched in Japan, and then Black electrical engineer Jesse Russell pioneered the creation of 2G, which launched in Finland first. 3G launched in Japan, 4G launched in Norway, 5G launched in South Korea, and 30% of the world's cell phones are manufactured in China. Because we, of the global majority, recognize that collective humanity has the ingenuity and creativity of one another to thank, whereas a lot of European Americans are laboring under the delusion that the rest of us have white people to thank. And it's this narcissistic ignorance that causes people like you to do embarrassing things, like leaving comments about Europeans and cell phones on a video about systemic anti-Black racism in the United States. And while that could be written off as a comedic and senile non sequitur, we recognize it as a desperate attempt to center yourself in a conversation that has nothing to do with you. The irony being that white people like to say not all white people and they shouldn't be held accountable for the misdeeds of their ancestors, yet they want to be associated with the greatness of the things that they think they invented. So, John Michael Kohler was an American who invented the bathtub in 1883. But let's think about this critically. Do you really think that nobody took a bath until John Michael Kohler invented the bathtub in 1883? Doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So what he was talking about is the fact that Africans introduced bathing and the concept of personal hygiene to Western Europe in order to build a healthier society during the 800-year occupation of Spain. In particular, a man by this name introduced the practices of bathing, shaving, and using toothpaste, as well as drastically improving the eating habits of Western Europeans. Additionally, the first recorded history of people taking baths was in India in 500 BC. A lot of us have gotten used to how little history some people like you know, particularly where it comes to anything not Eurocentric. However, I have a tip. Before you make a comment like this, do a quick Google search for whatever you think the topic at hand is. In this case, who invented bathing or who introduced bathing to Europe, and then decide whether you still want to make this comment. Hey buddy, your comment needs some help because when Dr. Earl Haas patented the tampon in 1931, he got the idea from his friend. She used a sponge because before this, women around the globe had been using tampons for thousands of years. There was a medical document that described the use of papyrus tampons that came from Egypt around the 15th century BCE. And I think what you meant to say was this modern nice world was made possible by labor and ideas stolen by white greedy bad men exploited for ruthless capitalism. Because you are yet another narcissist who's been indoctrinated by the education system to lack the critical thinking skills to understand that patenting does not equal invention. Patenting is the colonization of intellectual property, because invention usually requires the collective efforts of a diverse group of people over time. As I tell my students when they're having difficulty learning something, try to be patient and don't be too hard on yourself. The ability to apply logical reasoning to historical fact isn't going to make sense to somebody who watches a video correcting an erroneous comment about the 1800s who responds with stay in the 21st century. But it's okay, we all have our strong suits. Being an ignorant bigot isn't mine, and intelligence isn't yours. But I'm sure there are things that you're good at that you can focus on and celebrate. And if you'd like to get better at being intelligent, again, be patient, practice every opportunity that you have, and I'm sure that you can improve. I hope that helps. Important facets of my personality include kindness and empathy and the courage to speak up against wrongdoing, which is why I spend a lot of time advocating for dismantling white culture and explaining the history of current forms of systemic oppression. And my original intent was to encourage Asian Americans to engage in anti-racist work and to unlearn anti-Black bias. But who knew? There are so many narcissistic white people who show up to center themselves in conversations that don't have to have anything to do with them unless they identify with race, white supremacy culture, and upholding forms of systemic oppression.
So it is pretty obvious that white people use immigrants to fight black folks because what they fear most is blacks to accumulate wealth and pull a revenge. They feel like when black people become more stable, when they become a strong community, wealth is power, money is power. So they fear that if black people amass wealth, they might become stronger one day, and then pull up revenge. But this is what I have to say. I think if black people were to revenge, they could have revenged ages ago, thousands. Tens of years ago. They could have done that. And when you come to think of it, I think black people have a substantial, huge number in terms of population in the world. So I think it wouldn't be hard, because I think the pain of oppression, black oppression, has been felt back home in Africa, in the United States, in Australia, those who are taken to slavery in India, in the Arab world, in Europe. Everyone has felt that. So if black people were to pull up a revenge, they would have done that tens of years ago. They would have done that. We were put through segregation, colonialism, slavery. We have been everything has happened to us. So I think we just don't want to pull up a revenge. But seeing people of the Pearl misbehaving, or seeing white people misbehaving, always trying to fight black people, it is something that disturbs my mind, because one thing is, you can't take me out of where I belong. You take me to a new place. I try to survive. I try to build myself, and you're blocking me. So back to Asian American, and white people have never wanted Asian American in their neighborhoods. In matters doing business, building wealth. So they'd rather give wealth to these Asian American people to go and build businesses or set up businesses in black communities, in black neighborhoods, so that the Asian American people become the business owners, and the black people become the consumers. And number one, if you're a consumer, it is so easy for you to be exterminated. So it has been a systemic way of oppression, Instead of giving black people loans to build their own businesses in the black community, you're giving loans to Asian people so that these black people cannot own businesses, right? And they keep on giving their money to the Asian people. If you check it clearly, it is just a systemic racist and a capitalistic move by the state government to see black stay impoverished and allow other immigrants or minority communities to thrive in the black neighborhoods. Cases of women being harassed, kids unalived by Asian business owners is just crazy. I think you've heard from that from Amishen, the speaker, whereby she has given instances. A woman was harassed, beaten up by broomsticks. A 15-year-old girl was unalive because someone, an Asian business owner, thought that she was trying to shoplift. When you see in 1965 the US government opening doors for Asian immigration instead of letting black people to do business by offering them loans speaks volume, because these people had been freed from slavery, and now they were trying to survive. So these people were supposed to be given loans and incentives to set up businesses so that they could depend on themselves, right? So I think Asians, I think for decades, Asians have been weaponized by the white people or the state to fight blacks in business, because you can't take your business, you can't take your business from here. You can't take people who can build their own communities like the Chinatown, the Koreatown, to build their own businesses, run themselves, and make their own profits, sell to their own people. Why would you take these people to a different group to go and take money from this group? It's just a systemic racist way of dealing with black people, which is really unfair, by the way. And this is what I can say. I think Asians should desist from being used as cheap thugs. Yeah, they should desist from being used by the white people as cheap thugs, because before the 60s they couldn't come to the United States because they had been previously given a chance to finish blacks economically, but they couldn't utilize it fully. So during the Second World War, they were beaten up, their businesses destroyed, chased out of Africa. Then in 1965, you see Asian immigration policy gets to be enacted, and here comes Asians who will enjoy privileges fought by the black people. Most of the human rights and civil rights in the United States have been fought for by the black people. People shed blood, people lost their lives, people lost their businesses, people were given lifetime scars just for other people to come and enjoy the same privileges while black people keep on suffering. So I don't think if it is right to see black people suffer, while other people are thriving. So we can still keep on having this conversation in the comments. I'd really like to have a conversation with you in the comments, and I really appreciate each and every one of you who drops a comment, drops a like, and those who are subscribing to this channel, those people who are following me on my socials. You can also do something. That is my MiniPay. I hope you all know MiniPay, and this is not a sponsored video. MiniPay, you can just send money to any person anywhere in the world. My number is on my bio. You can do that, and I'd really appreciate that. So I'd like to see you in my next video, but before that, make sure that you give this video a thumbs up so that it can be pushed to many people as possible. Make sure that you share this video with your brothers and sisters. Make sure that you turn on post notifications, that every time I post a new video, you'll be the first person to get notified about it. And right about now, guys, peace out.